Standing in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at the legal documents spread across my marble countertop, I finally understood why my mother in law had whispered those venomous words at my baby shower 6 months ago. The will in my trembling hands contained secrets that would change everything. Secrets that made her cruel prediction about me never being enough sound like a desperate warning rather than an insult. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Anna Richardson, and until that November morning when everything unraveled, I thought I had the perfect life in Westchester County. My husband Marcus owned 3 successful auto dealerships across New York. We lived in a stunning colonial house with wraparound porches, and I was 7 months pregnant with our first child. From the outside, we looked like the American dream personified. The trouble began the day I met Marcus's mother, Evelyn Richardson. She arrived at our engagement party wearing a black dress that seemed more appropriate for a funeral than a celebration. While Marcus mingled with guests on our back patio, Evelyn cornered me near the dessert table, her steel gray eyes scanning me from head to toe like I was merchandise she was considering returning. "You're quite young, aren't you, dear?" she said, her voice honey-sweet but with an edge that made my skin crawl. "Marcus has always been attracted to simple things." I forced a smile, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. "I'm 26, Mrs. Richardson, not exactly a teenager." She laughed, but it sounded more like glass breaking. "Oh, I wasn't referring to your age, sweetie." That was my first taste of Evelyn Richardson's particular brand of psychological warfare. Over the following months, she perfected the art of the backhanded compliment and the perfectly timed insult disguised as concern. When Marcus and I announced my pregnancy, she clapped her hands together and exclaimed, "How wonderful! I do hope the baby inherits the Richardson intelligence." When I mentioned taking prenatal yoga classes, she nodded thoughtfully and said, "Exercise is so important, especially when you're carrying extra weight to begin with." Marcus seemed oblivious to his mother's behavior, or maybe he'd grown so accustomed to it that her cruelty had become background noise. Whenever I tried to bring up her comments, he'd wave them off with phrases like, "That's just how mom is," or "She means well, Anna, she's from a different generation." The baby shower was supposed to be my day. My sister Claire had organized everything beautifully at the country club, complete with elegant floral arrangements and a dessert table that looked like something from a magazine. 40 of our closest friends and family members gathered to celebrate our upcoming arrival, and for the first few hours, everything felt magical. I was opening gifts in the main parlor, surrounded by pastel wrapping paper and cooing guests, when Evelyn appeared beside my chair. She'd been uncharacteristically quiet during the party, which should have been my first warning sign. While everyone else watched me unwrap a beautiful handmade quilt from my grandmother, Evelyn leaned down close to my ear. Her breath was warm against my skin as she whispered, "You'll never be enough for this family, Anna. You can play house all you want, but blood tells, and you're not Richardson blood." The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze, the quilt still clutched in my hands, as Evelyn straightened up and smiled brightly at the other guests, as if nothing had happened. No one else had heard her venomous whisper, and when I looked around the room, everyone was still focused on the gift-opening ceremony. "Anna, honey, are you all right?" my sister Claire asked, noticing that I'd gone pale. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I glanced up at Evelyn, who was now chatting pleasantly with my aunt about nursery decorating tips, her mask of respectability firmly in place. "I'm fine," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "Just a little tired." The rest of the shower passed in a blur. I went through the motions of opening gifts and thanking guests, but Evelyn's words echoed in my mind like a curse. "You'll never be enough." The phrase followed me home that evening and haunted my dreams for weeks afterward. I threw myself into preparing for the baby's arrival, hoping that staying busy would help me forget the incident. I painted the nursery a soft yellow, assembled the crib with Marcus's help, and read every parenting book I could get my hands on. But late at night, when Marcus was asleep beside me, I'd find myself staring at the ceiling and wondering what Evelyn had meant about Richardson blood. Marcus's family had money, that much was obvious. They lived in a sprawling estate in Scarsdale, took European vacations every summer, and seemed to know everyone worth knowing in New York's business circles. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Family conversations would stop abruptly when I entered the room. Important phone calls were taken behind closed doors. And there were certain topics, particularly anything involving Marcus's late father, that seemed completely off limits. 3 weeks before my due date, Marcus received a call that changed everything. We were having dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant when his phone rang. I watched his face go white as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "We need to go," he said, signaling for the check. "Mom's been in an accident." The drive to Mount Sinai Hospital felt eternal. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, and neither of us spoke during the 40-minute journey into the city. When we finally reached the ICU, we found Evelyn connected to machines and barely conscious, the victim of what the doctors described as a severe heart attack. "She's stable for now," the cardiologist explained, "but the next 24 hours are critical. You should prepare yourselves for any possibility." Marcus spent that night in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside his mother's bed, holding her hand and whispering reassurances I wasn't sure she could hear. I tried to be supportive, bringing him coffee and sandwiches from the cafeteria, but I couldn't shake the memory of her cruel whisper at my baby shower. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused at first, taking in the beeping machines and sterile hospital room, but when she saw Marcus, her face softened with genuine love, perhaps the first authentic emotion I'd ever witnessed from her. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible, I need to tell you something about the will." I started to leave the room, assuming this was a private family matter, but Evelyn's eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that stopped me in my tracks. "No," she said, slightly stronger now. "Anna needs to hear this too. She has a right to know." Marcus looked bewildered. "Mom, you need to rest. The will can wait." But Evelyn was already shaking her head, struggling to sit up despite the tubes and wires. "The safe," she gasped, "behind the painting in your father's study. The combination is your birthday, Marcus. Everything you need to know is in there." She closed her eyes then, exhausted by the effort of speaking, and the machines around her resumed their steady rhythm. Marcus and I exchanged glances, both of us wondering what secrets could be so important that she'd risk her health to reveal them. 2 days later, Evelyn was stable enough to be moved to a private room, and Marcus finally agreed to leave the hospital long enough to retrieve whatever documents she'd hidden in his father's study. The Richardson estate in Scarsdale felt different as we approached it that gray December afternoon, more imposing somehow, as if the Victorian mansion was guarding secrets behind its ornate windows. Marcus had inherited his father's study exactly as Theodore Richardson had left it 15 years ago. Dark mahogany bookcases lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes on finance and law. A massive oak desk dominated the center of the room, and above the fireplace hung an oil painting of a clipper ship battling stormy seas. "I haven't been in here in years," Marcus admitted, running his fingers along the painting's gilded frame. "Dad always said this room was off limits when we were kids." The painting swung away from the wall on hidden hinges, revealing a steel safe embedded in the brick. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he entered his birthday, 0815191, into the digital lock. The safe opened with a soft click, and inside we found a collection of documents that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my husband's family. The first folder contained financial records dating back 30 years, page after page of bank statements, wire transfers, and business transactions that painted a picture of wealth far beyond what I'd imagined. The Richardson family wasn't just comfortable, they were sitting on a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But it was the second folder that made my blood run cold. Insurance policies, each one worth $20 million, taken out on various business partners who had all died under mysterious circumstances over the past 2 decades. Car accidents, heart attacks, drowning incidents, all ruled accidental or natural, but the timing seemed impossibly convenient. Marcus, I whispered, holding up one of the policies, this man died 3 days after you bought out his share of the dealership in Albany. My husband's face had gone ashen. He was staring at a letter written in his father's distinctive handwriting, dated just weeks before Theodore's own death from what everyone believed was a stroke. My son, the letter began, if you're reading this, then circumstances have forced us to reveal the true source of the Richardson fortune. The businesses are legitimate now, but they were built on foundations that cannot bear scrutiny. The policies you found were not my idea. They were requirements of men who do not forgive debts or forget slights. I tried to break free from them, and I fear it may have cost me my life. The letter went on to detail a web of connections to organized crime families in New York and New Jersey. Theodore had apparently borrowed money from the wrong people to start his first car dealership in the 1980s, and when he couldn't repay the loan, he'd been forced into a partnership that required him to launder money through his expanding business empire. The Castellano family expects 20% of all profits, the letter continued. They also require certain favors from time to time, insurance policies on competitors, accidents that clear the way for new opportunities, and witnesses who suddenly develop memory problems. I have tried to shield you from this world, Marcus, but I fear they will come for you eventually. My hands were trembling as I opened the third folder, which contained photographs and surveillance reports. Pictures of Marcus and me at restaurants, at the hospital, even walking through our own neighborhood. Someone had been watching us for months, documenting our daily routines with professional precision.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The final document in the safe was Evelyn's last will and testament, dated just 6 months ago, right around the time of my baby shower. As I read through the legal language, one clause jumped out at me like a neon sign. In the event that my son Marcus Richardson predeceases me or is unable to fulfill his obligations to the family's business partners, all assets shall transfer immediately to his wife, Anna Richardson, along with all attendant responsibilities and debts. I felt the room spinning around me. The baby kicked hard against my ribs as if sensing my distress. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "your mother didn't insult me at the baby shower. She was trying to warn me." My husband looked up from another document he'd been reading, a contract with someone named Vincent Castellano that outlined the terms of their partnership in disturbing detail. Warn you about what? She knew they might come after you. She knew I might end up inheriting all of this. I gestured at the papers scattered around us. She was telling me I'd never be enough to handle what comes with being a Richardson. The money, the businesses, the other obligations. Marcus sank into his father's leather chair, suddenly looking decades older than his 32 years. "Hannah, we need to get out of here. We need to take these documents and disappear before—" The sound of car doors slamming in the driveway cut him off mid-sentence. Through the study window, I could see 2 black SUVs parked behind our car, blocking our exit. 4 men in expensive suits were walking toward the front door with the measured pace of people who had all the time in the world. "They know we're here," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "They've probably been monitoring the safe somehow, waiting for us to open it." The doorbell chimed once, then again. When no one answered, we heard the distinctive sound of a key turning in the front door lock. "Mr. Richardson?" a voice called from the foyer. The accent was thick Brooklyn, polite, but with an undertone of menace. "We know you're here. We just want to talk." Marcus grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the study's back door, which led to a small patio overlooking the gardens. But as we stepped outside, 2 more men appeared around the corner of the house, cutting off our escape route. "Please," one of them said, gesturing toward the house, "Mr. Castellano would like a word." We had no choice but to go back inside. In the living room, a man in his 60s sat comfortably in Evelyn's favorite armchair, as if he owned the place. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit clearly custom-tailored, and his cold blue eyes missed nothing as they took in our disheveled appearance. "Vincent Castellano," he said, not bothering to stand. "You must be Anna. I've heard so much about you." The way he said my name made my skin crawl. This was the man whose signature had been on those contracts, whose organization had controlled the Richardson family for decades. "Your mother-in-law is quite fond of you," Castellano continued conversationally. "She's been telling everyone at the hospital how proud she is to finally have a daughter-in-law who can handle the family responsibilities." I found my voice somehow. What responsibilities? Castellano smiled, and it was like watching a shark bare its teeth. "The same ones your husband has been avoiding for the past 15 years. The same ones that got his father permanently relocated when he tried to break our arrangement." Marcus stepped protectively in front of me. "My father died of a stroke." "Your father died because he thought he could walk away from us with $100 million of our money in his accounts." Castellano's voice remained pleasant, but the threat was unmistakable. "We convinced him that retirement wasn't an option. Unfortunately, the stress of that conversation proved too much for his heart." The room felt like it was closing in around us. My baby was due in 3 weeks, and here I was learning that my child would be born into a family controlled by criminals who killed people who tried to leave. "What do you want from us?" I asked, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. Castellano leaned forward slightly. "The same thing we wanted from Theodore, and the same thing we've been waiting for Marcus to understand: cooperation. Your husband's car dealerships are perfect for our needs. Lots of cash transactions, easy to manipulate the books, excellent cover for moving certain products across state lines." He stood up then, smoothing down his jacket. "The good news is you don't have to make this decision today. Take some time to think it over. Discuss it with Evelyn when she's feeling better. She understands the situation better than anyone." As he walked toward the door, he paused and turned back to us. "Oh, and congratulations on the pregnancy. Children are such a blessing. They give us so much to live for and so much to protect." The threat hung in the air long after the black SUVs disappeared down the driveway. Marcus and I stood in the empty house, surrounded by the evidence of his family's dark legacy, knowing that our lives had just changed forever. The drive home from the Richardson estate felt like traveling through a nightmare. Every car that followed us for more than a block made my heart race. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Marcus kept checking the rearview mirror, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, while I clutched the manila envelope containing copies of the most damaging documents we'd found in the safe. "We can't go to the police," Marcus said as we pulled into our driveway. "Half the evidence in that envelope implicates me in money laundering, even if I didn't know about it. The businesses are in my name, Anna. On paper, I'm the one who's been running dirty money through the dealerships." Inside our house, everything looked exactly as we'd left it that morning, but it felt different now, contaminated somehow, as if Castellano's presence had poisoned even our private sanctuary. I sank onto the living room couch, my pregnant belly making it difficult to find a comfortable position, while Marcus paced the length of our hardwood floors. "There has to be something we can do," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew how naive they sounded. We could sell everything, pay them back, and start over somewhere else. Marcus stopped pacing and stared at me with a mixture of love and pity. "Anna, you don't pay back people like Castellano. You work for them until they decide you're no longer useful, and then—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Check your email. Time sensitive. A friend." The message that appeared in my inbox contained no sender identification, but the subject line made my blood run cold. "Insurance policy. A. Richardson." The body of the email was brief and terrifying. "Mrs. Richardson, a $20 million life insurance policy has been taken out on you as of today. Your signature was forged using samples from your recent mortgage refinancing documents. The beneficiary is listed as Vincent Castellano. You have 48 hours to make contact before this policy becomes active. The phone number is attached."
Marcus read the email over my shoulder, his face going gray. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. They want you scared enough to cooperate. But something about the message bothered me beyond the obvious threat. Marcus, look at the email address it came from. The sender was listed as deepthroat2025 at protonmail.com, clearly someone using an anonymous account. Someone inside Castellano's organization is trying to help us, I realized. Someone who has access to their insurance schemes and doesn't want to see us end up like your father. Before Marcus could respond, our doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a woman in a hospital visitor's badge standing on our porch. She was middle-aged, with graying brown hair and kind eyes, but her face was etched with worry. "Mrs. Richardson," she said when I opened the door, "my name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm your mother-in-law's cardiologist at Mount Sinai. I need to speak with you about Evelyn's condition." We invited her in, assuming this was a routine medical update, but Dr. Chen's first words shattered that assumption. "Someone tried to murder your mother-in-law last night," she said without preamble. "They injected potassium chloride into her IV line. If our night nurse hadn't been running blood work every 2 hours as part of a research protocol, Evelyn would have died from what appeared to be a natural cardiac episode." The room seemed to tilt around me. Marcus grabbed my arm to steady me as I processed what Dr. Chen was telling us. "The hospital administration wants to involve the police, but Evelyn specifically asked me to speak with you first. She said you'd understand why this needs to be handled differently." Dr. Chen reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "She also asked me to give you this. She recorded it this morning when she was lucid." Marcus pressed play, and his mother's weak voice filled our living room. "Anna, Marcus, if you're hearing this, then they've already tried once and failed. Vincent won't make the same mistake twice. He knows I've been planning to testify against the organization, and he can't risk exposing me to 30 years of their operations." There was a pause, filled with the sound of hospital equipment beeping in the background. "I've been working with the FBI for the past 8 months. Agent Rebecca Torres from the Organized Crime Task Force, she'll be expecting your call. I couldn't tell you before because they needed Marcus's businesses to stay operational so they could gather evidence on the money laundering operations." Another pause, longer this time. "Anna, I'm so sorry for what I said at your baby shower. I was terrified for you, for the baby, for Marcus. I knew this day would come, and I didn't want you to be unprepared. You're stronger than any of us gave you credit for, and you're going to need that strength now." The recording ended with the sound of nurses entering Evelyn's room. Dr. Chen took the device back and looked at us with professional compassion. "There's more," she said. "Evelyn asked me to tell you that she's hidden additional evidence in a safety deposit box at First National Bank in White Plains, box 1247. She said you'd know where to find the key." After Dr. Chen left, Marcus and I sat in stunned silence. Everything was happening too fast. The threats, the attempted murder, the revelation that Evelyn had been working with federal agents. "The key," I said suddenly. "Your mother gave me something at the hospital yesterday. She said it was for good luck." I ran upstairs to our bedroom and retrieved the small silver key from my jewelry box. Evelyn had pressed it into my hand while Marcus was talking to doctors in the hallway, whispering something about keeping it safe for the baby. She's been planning this for months, Marcus realized. The will, the insurance policy warnings, everything. She knew Castellano would eventually make his move. My phone rang, and the caller ID showed the number from the anonymous email. Against Marcus's protests, I answered. "Mrs. Richardson?" The voice was male, middle-aged, with a slight Italian accent. "This is Detective Frank Rizzo, NYPD. I've been working undercover in the Castellano organization for 3 years." My legs nearly gave out. The mysterious friend who'd warned us about the insurance policy was a police officer. "Your mother-in-law contacted me 6 months ago," Detective Rizzo continued. "She'd figured out I wasn't who I claimed to be. Evelyn Richardson is sharper than anyone gave her credit for. Instead of exposing me, she offered to help." "Help how?" I managed to ask. "By gathering evidence from the inside. Every business meeting, every financial transaction, every threat, she's been documenting everything. The problem is, Castellano's getting suspicious. Last night's attempt on her life confirms it. Detective Rizzo's voice became urgent. You need to get to that safety deposit box tonight, before Castellano realizes what's in it. Once we have Evelyn's evidence, we can move forward with arrests, but we need that documentation to make the charges stick. What about the insurance policy on Anna? Marcus asked, having moved close enough to hear both sides of the conversation. That's Castellano's way of ensuring compliance. As long as the policy exists, you're both assets to be protected. The moment you become liabilities, Detective Rizzo didn't finish the thought. After hanging up, Marcus and I made our decision. We would go to the bank first thing in the morning, retrieve whatever evidence Evelyn had hidden, and turn it over to the authorities. It was our only chance at freedom. But as I lay in bed that night, feeling our baby move restlessly inside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Castellano had controlled the Richardson family for decades. He wouldn't give up that control without a fight. Outside our bedroom window, I noticed a car parked across the street that hadn't been there earlier. The same black sedan had been behind us when we left the hospital. They were watching us, waiting for us to make our next move. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The next morning arrived with an unexpected complication. I woke up at 5 a.m. with intense contractions that sent panic through both Marcus and me. We were still 3 weeks from my due date, but the stress of the past few days had apparently triggered early labor. We can't go to the hospital, I gasped between contractions, gripping Marcus's hand so tightly I was surprised I didn't break his fingers. Marcus called Dr. Chen, who arranged for us to meet her at a private birthing center in Connecticut, an hour's drive from our house. But as we prepared to leave, Detective Rizzo called with urgent news. Castellano moved up his timeline, he said, his voice tense. My sources inside the organization say he's planning to eliminate both of you today, before the insurance policy becomes active. You need to get that evidence now, or we'll never get another chance. Through gritted teeth, I made a decision that probably saved all our lives. Marcus goes to the bank. I go to the birthing center. We split up so they can't follow both of us. Anna, I'm not leaving you to give birth alone, Marcus protested, but another contraction doubled me over, and I knew we were out of time. Detective Rizzo's partner, Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI, met Marcus at the First National Bank, while I endured the longest car ride of my life to the birthing center. Dr. Chen had called ahead, and they were ready for an emergency delivery when I arrived. Meanwhile, Marcus and Agent Torres discovered that Evelyn's safety deposit box contained far more than just financial records. Hidden inside were audio recordings of Vincent Castellano personally ordering the deaths of 7 people over the past 15 years, including Marcus's mother. There were also photographs of Castellano meeting with corrupt police officials, judges, and city council members who had been taking bribes to look the other way. But the most damaging evidence was a detailed ledger in Evelyn's handwriting that documented every illegal transaction that had passed through the Richardson dealerships since 1995. Money laundering, drug smuggling, human trafficking, the scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. This is enough to bring down the entire East Coast operation, Agent Torres told Marcus as they photocopied the documents. Your mother risked her life to gather this information. Back at the birthing center, I was in the final stages of labor when Dr. Chen's phone buzzed with an emergency alert from Mount Sinai Hospital. Evelyn had disappeared from her room sometime during the night shift change. The security cameras showed 2 men in hospital scrubs wheeling her out in what appeared to be a routine patient transfer, but no such transfer had been authorized. They have her, I realized through my exhaustion and pain. Castellano took her to use as leverage. Dr. Chen tried to keep me calm and focused on the delivery, but my mind was racing with possibilities, none of them good. If Castellano had Evelyn, he would use her to force Marcus and me to destroy the evidence and resume the family's role in his criminal empire. At 2:47 p.m., my daughter Emma Rose Richardson entered the world. 8 pounds, 2 ounces of pure perfection with her father's dark hair and my green eyes. For a brief moment, holding her in my arms, I forgot about Castellano and his threats and the dangerous world we'd inherited. But that moment of peace shattered when Marcus burst into the birthing room, his face pale and his eyes wild with panic. "They have Mom," he confirmed what I'd already suspected. "Castellano called. He wants to make a trade. Evelyn's life for all the evidence, plus a guarantee that we'll continue operating the businesses according to his terms." Agent Torres appeared in the doorway behind him, looking grim. "We can't make that deal. If we give up this evidence, dozens of criminals walk free, and Castellano continues operating with impunity. More people will die." I looked down at my newborn daughter, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding her birth, and felt something fierce and protective rise up inside me. This tiny person deserved a world free from the darkness that had consumed the Richardson family for 3 decades. "What if we don't give up the evidence?" I asked Agent Torres. "What if we use it as bait?" The FBI agent raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" My mind was working faster than it had in weeks, fueled by maternal instincts and desperate determination. Castellano thinks he holds all the cards because he has Evelyn, but he doesn't know about Detective Rizzo, and he doesn't know we've already copied the evidence. I outlined my plan to Agent Torres and Marcus, who both looked at me as if I'd lost my mind from the stress of childbirth. But as I explained the details, I could see them beginning to understand the elegance of the trap I was proposing. "It's incredibly dangerous," Agent Torres warned. "If anything goes wrong, we could lose both you and Evelyn." "If we do nothing, we lose everything anyway," I pointed out. "Emma deserves better than growing up under Castellano's control." 3 hours later, I was discharged from the birthing center against medical advice, with Emma sleeping in her car seat and a team of federal agents following at a discreet distance. Marcus had arranged to meet Castellano at the old Richardson textile factory in Queens, a building that had been abandoned for 20 years but was still technically owned by the family. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. I would go to the meeting with fake evidence, documents that look authentic but contained subtle alterations that would be useless in court. While Castellano examined the papers, Agent Torres and her team would move in to arrest him and rescue Evelyn. The wild card was Detective Rizzo, who would be there as part of Castellano's security detail. He would signal when it was safe for the FBI to make their move, but if his cover was blown, we'd all be walking into an execution. As we drove towards Queens, Emma began crying for the first time since her birth, as if she sensed the danger ahead. I tried to soothe her with gentle whispers, promising her that after tonight, she would never have to live in fear of her family's dark legacy. The textile factory loomed against the December sky like something from a nightmare. Broken windows stared down at us like dead eyes, and graffiti covered the brick walls in layers of urban decay. This was where it would all end, either with freedom or with our deaths. Marcus parked our car next to 2 black SUVs, and we could see figures moving in the shadows of the building's loading dock. Castellano was already there, along with what looked like half a dozen armed men. "Remember," Agent Torres's voice crackled through the earpiece hidden in my coat collar. "Keep him talking as long as possible. We need time to locate Evelyn and get her to safety." I picked up Emma's car seat and the manila envelope containing the fake documents, my hands surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Marcus took my free hand and squeezed it gently. "Whatever happens in there," he whispered, "I love you. Both of you." Together, we walked toward what would either be our salvation or our doom, knowing that the next hour would determine whether our daughter would grow up free or forever trapped in the web of violence and corruption that had consumed the Richardson family for far too long. The interior of the abandoned textile factory was a maze of rusted machinery and broken concrete, lit only by portable floodlights that cast eerie shadows across the walls. Vincent Castellano stood in the center of what had once been the main production floor, impeccably dressed as always, but his usual calm demeanor showed cracks of desperation. "Anna," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Congratulations on the birth of your daughter. Such a beautiful child deserves to grow up with her family intact." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Beside him, Detective Rizzo stood with 3 other men, all armed, all watching our every movement. I clutched Emma's car seat closer to my chest, grateful that she remained sleeping despite the tension radiating from everyone in the room. "Where's Evelyn?" Marcus demanded, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Castellano gestured toward a freight elevator in the corner of the building. Safe and comfortable on the 3rd floor, she's been quite chatty during our time together, telling me all about her little arrangement with federal law enforcement. My blood ran cold. If Castellano knew about Evelyn's cooperation with the FBI, then he also knew about the evidence we'd found. Our entire plan could be compromised. "She also told me something very interesting about you, Anna," Castellano continued, his cold eyes fixed on me. "Apparently, you've been asking a lot of questions about the family business, questions that suggest you might not be as naive as you pretend to be." I forced myself to meet his gaze, channeling every ounce of strength I had left after Emma's birth. I'm a mother now. I have the right to know what kind of world my daughter is inheriting. "Indeed you do," Castellano smiled, but it was the expression of a predator toying with its prey. "Which is why I'm prepared to offer you a choice. You can continue the Richardson family tradition of cooperation, accept your role in our organization, and raise your daughter in comfort and security. Or—" He let the alternative hang in the air like a poison cloud. Marcus stepped forward. "We brought the documents. Everything from the safe, everything from the safety deposit box. You can have it all in exchange for my mother's freedom." I handed the manila envelope to one of Castellano's men, who passed it to his boss. As Castellano opened it and began examining the papers, I noticed Detective Rizzo subtly adjusting his position, moving closer to the freight elevator where Evelyn was presumably being held. "These are quite comprehensive," Castellano murmured, flipping through pages of financial records and insurance policies. "Your mother-in-law was more thorough than I expected." But as he continued reading, his expression began to change. His eyes narrowed, and he looked up at us with the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him: anger. "Do you think I'm stupid?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying more menace than any shout. "These documents have been altered. Account numbers changed, dates modified, signatures forged. Did you really think you could fool me with amateur forgeries?" The game was up, but before any of us could react, Emma chose that moment to wake up and begin crying. The sound of her distress cut through the tension like a knife, and I felt every maternal instinct screaming at me to get her to safety. "The baby's hungry," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "She needs to eat." Castellano studied me for a long moment, then nodded to one of his men. "There's a small office upstairs. You can feed her there while we discuss how to resolve this unfortunate situation." As I was escorted toward a narrow staircase, I caught Detective Rizzo's eye. He gave an almost imperceptible nod, and I knew the FBI team was in position. Whatever was about to happen, it would happen soon. The office was little more than a closet with a broken desk and a single chair, but it provided the privacy I needed to nurse Emma and prepare for what came next. Through the thin walls, I could hear Castellano's voice rising as he interrogated Marcus about the location of the real evidence. "Your wife is very clever," he was saying, "but cleverness only goes so far when you're dealing with people who have nothing left to lose." The sound of footsteps on metal stairs told me someone was coming. I had perhaps 30 seconds before they discovered that I'd used the nursing session as cover to activate a recording app on my phone, which was now capturing every word of Castellano's interrogation. When the door opened, it wasn't one of Castellano's men. It was Detective Rizzo. "Mrs. Richardson," he whispered urgently, "we have a problem. Castellano brought more men than we expected, and they're positioned throughout the building. The FBI can't move in without risking a firefight with you and the baby in the crossfire." Emma had finished nursing and was sleeping peacefully again, oblivious to the danger surrounding her. I looked down at her tiny face and made a decision that went against every instinct I had as a new mother. "Take her," I told Detective Rizzo. Get her out of here. Anna, I can't. You can and you will, I interrupted. There's a service exit on the second floor that leads to the fire escape. The FBI team can retrieve her from there. Detective Rizzo hesitated, but he could see the determination in my eyes. He carefully took Emma's car seat, his expression showing both admiration and concern. What are you going to do? I thought about Evelyn's words at my baby shower, about never being enough for the Richardson family. But I also thought about her recorded message, about her courage in working with the FBI despite the danger. Maybe being enough wasn't about meeting someone else's expectations. Maybe it was about protecting the people you loved, no matter the cost. I'm going to finish what Evelyn started, I said. After Detective Rizzo disappeared with Emma, I returned to the main floor to find Castellano holding a gun to Marcus's head. The sight sent ice through my veins, but I forced myself to remain calm. Where's the baby? Castellano demanded. Safe, I replied, and she's going to stay that way. You're in no position to make demands, Mrs. Richardson. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone, holding it so he could see the recording app was still running. Actually, I think I am. For the past 20 minutes, this phone has been recording everything you've said. Confessions to murder, details about your criminal organization, threats against my family. Even if you kill us both right now, that recording is automatically uploaded to a secure server. Castellano's face went white. You're bluffing. Try me, I said, my finger hovering over the phone screen. One touch, and this recording gets sent to the FBI, the NYPD, the District Attorney's Office, and 3 major news outlets simultaneously. Your organization won't survive the exposure. For the first time since I'd met him, Vincent Castellano looked genuinely uncertain. He was a man who controlled others through fear and violence, but he'd never encountered someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The standoff lasted perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt like hours. Then, the building exploded with sound and light as FBI agents swarmed through every entrance simultaneously. Smoke grenades filled the air, and tactical lights cut through the darkness like laser beams. In the chaos that followed, I lost sight of Marcus and Castellano. Agents were shouting orders, suspects were being tackled to the ground, and the old building echoed with the sounds of what seemed like a small war. When the smoke finally cleared, I found myself sitting on the concrete floor with Agent Torres beside me, both of us covered in dust but very much alive. Across the room, Castellano was in handcuffs, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where he'd been tackled during his attempt to escape. Emma, I asked, my voice hoarse from the smoke. Safe, Agent Torres assured me. Detective Rizzo got her out before the operation began. She's with the paramedics outside. Marcus appeared at my side, helping me to my feet. His shirt was torn, and he had a bruise forming on his cheek, but his eyes were bright with relief and something that might have been pride. Is it over? I asked. Agent Torres looked around at the scene of arrested criminals and seized evidence. This part is over, but there will be trials, testimony, probably months of legal proceedings before you're completely free of this mess. As we walked toward the exit, I saw Evelyn being helped down from the freight elevator by 2 paramedics. She was weak and pale, but when she saw us, her face lit up with joy. Anna, she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. You did it. You actually did it. For the first time since I'd met her, Evelyn Richardson looked at me with genuine respect and affection. The woman who had once told me I'd never be enough for her family was now seeing me as the person who had saved them all. 6 months later, I stood in the witness box of the Southern District Federal Courthouse in Manhattan, holding my testimony notes in hands that no longer trembled. Emma sat quietly in the gallery with my sister Claire, her bright eyes taking in the formal proceedings with the curious attention of a healthy 7-month-old baby. Vincent Castellano's trial had become the criminal case of the decade. 43 defendants, ranging from low-level enforcers to high-ranking city officials, all facing charges that could put them away for life. The media called it the biggest takedown of organized crime in New York since the Gotti trials. Mrs. Richardson, the federal prosecutor said, approaching the witness stand, Can you tell the court about the conversation you recorded at the textile factory on December 15th? I spoke clearly and confidently, recounting every detail of that terrifying night. How Castellano had confessed to ordering my father-in-law's murder, how he'd threatened my newborn daughter, how he'd described 30 years of criminal enterprise as casually as discussing the weather. When the defense attorney cross-examined me, trying to paint me as an unreliable witness suffering from postpartum stress, I remained calm and factual. The evidence spoke for itself. Hours of recorded conversations, financial documents, and testimony from Detective Rizzo, who had been working undercover for 3 years to bring down the organization. During a recess, I met with Agent Torres in the courthouse cafeteria. The past months had transformed both of us. She'd been promoted to head the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, while I'd discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. "How's the relocation process going?" she asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. The Witness Protection Program had offered us new identities and a fresh start in another state, but Marcus and I had ultimately decided to stay in New York. The Richardson dealerships, once cleaned of their criminal connections, were legitimately profitable businesses. More importantly, running away felt like letting Castellano win, even from his prison cell. "We're staying put," I told her, "but we're making some changes." The biggest change was our living situation. Marcus and I had sold the house in Westchester and moved into a penthouse apartment in the city, complete with a security system that would make the Pentagon jealous. Emma's nursery had bulletproof windows and a panic room, precautions that seemed extreme but necessary given the number of Castellano associates still awaiting trial. Evelyn had recovered fully from her ordeal and had become an unexpected ally in rebuilding our lives. The woman who had once whispered cruel warning at my baby shower now spent her days helping me navigate the complex legal proceedings while bonding with her granddaughter. "You know," she'd said to me just last week while watching Emma take her first tentative steps across our living room, "I was wrong about you at the baby shower." "You were trying to protect us," I'd replied, but she shook her head. "No, I was projecting my own fears onto you. I'd spent 30 years feeling powerless against Vincent's organization, convinced that no one could be strong enough to break free. But you proved that being enough isn't about meeting impossible standards. It's about refusing to accept unacceptable circumstances." The afternoon of my testimony, Marcus and I drove to the cemetery in Queens where his father was buried. We'd discovered that Theodore Richardson's gravestone bore an inscription chosen by Castellano's people, "A man who knew his place." Today, we were having it replaced. The new inscription read simply, "Theodore Richardson, beloved father and husband, he tried to break the chains." As we stood beside the grave, Marcus placed a small bouquet of white roses on the headstone. "I think he would have been proud of what we did," he said quietly. Emma gurgled happily from her stroller, reaching for the colorful flowers with chubby fingers that had never known fear or violence. She would grow up knowing the truth about her family's past, but she would also know that her parents had chosen to break the cycle. 3 weeks later, the verdicts came down. Vincent Castellano, guilty on all counts, sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His lieutenant, who had tried to murder Evelyn, 25 years. The corrupt police officials and judges, sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. Detective Rizzo, whose undercover work had been crucial to the prosecution's case, was promoted to captain and assigned to lead a new task force targeting financial crimes. During the celebration dinner at a restaurant in Little Italy, a choice that felt deliciously ironic, he raised his glass in a toast. "To the Richardson family," he said, "for proving that sometimes the best way to honor your ancestors is to refuse to repeat their mistakes." But the real celebration came 2 months later, when the last of the legal proceedings finally concluded and we received official word that the threat assessment had been downgraded. The remnants of Castellano's organization were either in prison, in hiding, or had moved their operations to other cities, where they wouldn't have to deal with the intense federal scrutiny that now surrounded anyone associated with the case. For the first time in over a year, Marcus and I could walk down the street without looking over our shoulders. Emma could play in Central Park without armed security guards watching from a distance. We could be a normal family, or at least our version of normal. One evening in late summer, as I was giving Emma her bath in our apartment's luxurious bathroom, she looked up at me with eyes that held all the wonder and trust of a child who had never known anything but love and safety. Her first word had been Mama, followed quickly by Dada, and then, surprisingly, Eva, her attempt at saying Evelyn's name. The 3 generations of Richardson women were building something new together. Evelyn had started a foundation that provided support services for families affected by organized crime, using her insider knowledge to help other victims navigate the complex process of breaking free from criminal organizations. I had returned to school to study law, inspired by Agent Torres and the prosecutors who had fought so hard for justice. Marcus had transformed the car dealerships into a model of ethical business practices, implementing transparency measures and community outreach programs that turned the businesses into pillars of their local communities rather than tools for criminal enterprise. On Emma's first birthday, we threw a party at the apartment that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Federal agents mingled with family friends, Detective Rizzo's children played with Emma's toys, and Agent Torres helped blow up balloons while discussing her latest case. Evelyn, now a doting grandmother who spoiled Emma shamelessly, pulled me aside during the party. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate gold locket with Emma's birthstone in the center. When I opened it, I found a tiny photo of Emma on one side and an inscription on the other. "To Anna, you were always enough." As I fastened the locket around my neck, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The woman who had once whispered cruel words at my baby shower had become one of my closest allies. The family legacy of fear and violence had been transformed into one of courage and justice. And the baby who had been born into a world of danger was now growing up surrounded by love and protection. That night, after all the guests had gone home and Emma was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Marcus and I sat on our balcony overlooking the city lights. The same skyline that had once seemed threatening now felt like a symbol of possibility. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked, taking my hand, "fighting back instead of just running away?" I thought about his question as I watched the traffic move through the streets below, each set of headlights representing someone else's story, someone else's choices about how to face adversity. "No," I said, finally. "Emma deserves to know that when her family was threatened, we didn't run. We stood our ground and we won." The Richardson name would survive, but it would mean something completely different for Emma than it had for the generations before her. Instead of representing fear and compliance, it would stand for courage and the refusal to accept that some battles can't be won. And sometimes, late at night, when Emma was sleeping and the apartment was quiet, I would remember Evelyn's whispered words at my baby shower, "You'll never be enough." Now I understood the truth. I had always been enough. I just needed to discover it for myself. 5 years have passed since that terrifying night at the textile factory, and as I write this, Emma is preparing for her first day of kindergarten. She's sitting at the kitchen table in our Connecticut home. We eventually did move out of the city, but on our own terms, carefully coloring a picture of our family that she plans to show her new teacher. The drawing shows 4 figures holding hands: Mommy, Daddy, Emma, and Grandma Eva. It's a simple child's artwork, but it represents something profound: a family rebuilt from the ashes of corruption and fear. Our new home sits on 3 acres of rolling hills in Litchfield County, far enough from the city to feel peaceful, but close enough for Marcus to oversee the dealerships, which now employ over 200 people across 5 locations. The business that once laundered money for criminals now provides college scholarships for underprivileged students and sponsors youth sports leagues throughout Connecticut and New York. This morning, as I helped Emma pick out her first day of school outfit, she asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. "Mommy, why does Grandma Eva sometimes look sad when she thinks no one is watching?" Children see things adults miss, and Emma had noticed what I'd been trying to ignore. Despite our victory over Castellano's organization, despite the successful trials and the new life we'd built, Evelyn still carried the weight of 30 years spent living in fear. Last month, we'd received news that Vincent Castellano had died in federal prison. A heart attack, the official said, though rumors suggested his former associates had finally caught up with him. When I told Evelyn, she'd simply nodded and said, "Good, now maybe Theodore can rest in peace." But I could see that Castellano's death hadn't brought her the closure she'd hoped for. The trauma of those decades doesn't disappear overnight, even when justice is served. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had become not just Evelyn's cardiologist but a family friend, had recommended therapy specifically designed for crime victims. It was during one of these sessions that Evelyn finally revealed the full extent of what she'd endured. Last month, we'd received news that Vincent Castellano had died in federal prison. A heart attack, the official said, though rumors suggested his former associates had finally caught up with him. When I told Evelyn, she'd simply nodded and said, "Good, now maybe Theodore can rest in peace." But I could see that Castellano's death hadn't brought her the closure she'd hoped for. The trauma of those decades doesn't disappear overnight, even when justice is served. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had become not just Evelyn's cardiologist but a family friend, had recommended therapy specifically designed for crime victims. It was during one of these sessions that Evelyn finally revealed the full extent of what she'd endured.
I blamed myself for Theodore's death for 15 years, she admitted to the therapist while Marcus and I listened from across the room. I thought if I'd been stronger, if I'd fought back sooner, I could have saved him. That's why I was so angry at Anna in the beginning. I saw her strength and it reminded me of my own failures. The therapy sessions became a family affair. We learned about generational trauma, about how violence and fear can be passed down like genetic traits if they're not consciously interrupted. We talked about Theodore's attempts to break free from Castellano's control and how his failure wasn't a reflection of weakness, but of the impossible situation he'd been placed in. One afternoon, while Emma napped and Marcus worked in his home office, Evelyn and I sat on the back porch of our Connecticut house, watching the autumn leaves fall across our property. She'd been quieter than usual that day, and I could sense she was working up to saying something important. "Anna," she began, her voice thoughtful, "I need to tell you something about that day at your baby shower." I looked at her with surprise. We'd discussed that incident many times over the years, and I thought we'd put it to rest. "When I whispered those words to you," she continued, "I wasn't just warning you about what was coming. I was testing you." "Testing me how?" Evelyn smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached her eyes completely. "I needed to know if you would crumble under pressure or if you'd find the strength to fight back. Theodore never had that strength. He was too gentle, too trusting. Marcus inherited his father's kind heart, which made him vulnerable in the same way." She reached over and took my hand. "But you got angry instead of scared. Even in that moment, surrounded by all those happy people at your shower, you didn't back down. You held my gaze, and I could see the fire in you. That's when I knew you might be the one to finally break us free." The revelation stunned me. All these years, I'd thought Evelyn's cruelty had been born from genuine dislike or class prejudice. Instead, it had been a deliberate provocation designed to reveal my true character. "So you planned everything?" I asked. "FBI cooperation? Evidence gathering?" "Not everything," she admitted. "I couldn't have predicted Castellano's timeline or the insurance policy threats. But I'd been watching his organization for years, waiting for the right moment to strike back. When you married Marcus, when you got pregnant, I realized the stakes were high enough to force their hand." Emma's voice calling from inside the house interrupted our conversation. She'd woken up from her nap and was looking for her grandmother, as she did every afternoon. Evelyn had become Emma's favorite person in the world, and watching them together was like seeing love heal decades of pain. That evening, as we prepared for Emma's kindergarten orientation, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed. The woman who had once been my greatest source of anxiety was now one of my closest confidants. The business that had been built on crime was now a force for good in our community. And the child who had been born into danger was now excited about making new friends and learning to read. At the school orientation, Emma charmed her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, by reciting the alphabet in both English and Spanish, a skill she'd picked up from our housekeeper, Maria, who had become like family to us.
When Mrs. Patterson asked Emma what she wanted to be when she grew up, our daughter answered without hesitation, a helper like Mommy and Grandma Eva. Marcus and I exchanged glances over Emma's head. She had absorbed our family's transformation and turned it into her own sense of purpose. The legacy we were leaving her wasn't one of fear or obligation, but of service and strength. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, clutching her new school supplies, I found myself in Marcus's study, a bright, open room that bore no resemblance to his father's dark sanctuary of secrets. Marcus was reviewing financial reports from the dealerships, but he looked up when I entered. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, referring to Emma's first day of school. "Excited," I corrected. "She's ready for this adventure." Marcus set aside his papers and pulled me onto his lap. "You know what I realized today, watching her at orientation?" "What?" "She has no fear. None at all. She walks into new situations expecting good things to happen, expecting people to like her, expecting the world to be safe and welcoming." His voice was filled with wonder. "She's everything we never got to be as children." That night, I dreamed about the baby shower again. Not the nightmare version that had haunted me for years, but a new interpretation. In this dream, Evelyn's whispered words weren't a curse, but a challenge. "You'll never be enough, unless you decide to be." When I woke up, I understood something that had taken me 5 years to fully grasp. Evelyn hadn't been telling me I was inadequate. She'd been daring me to prove her wrong, to show that I could be stronger than the circumstances trying to define me. The next morning, Emma bounded out of bed at 6 a.m., ready for her big day. She wore a yellow dress with sunflowers on it and her hair in 2 neat pigtails, looking like pure sunshine as she ate her breakfast and chattered about all the things she planned to learn. As we walked her to the school bus stop, other parents and children gathered around us. We'd become part of this community in a way that felt natural and unforced. No one here knew about our past. To them, we were just the Richardson family who lived in the big house on Maple Street and always participated in the school fundraisers. When the bus arrived, Emma hugged each of us goodbye, then climbed aboard with the confidence of a child who had never doubted her place in the world. Through the bus window, she waved frantically as they pulled away, her smile bright enough to power the entire school. "She's going to change the world," Evelyn said softly, watching the bus disappear around the corner. "She already has," I replied, thinking about how Emma's existence had been the catalyst for everything that followed. She changed ours. As we walked back to the house, I thought about the story I would someday tell Emma about her early years, about the grandmother who loved her enough to risk everything, about the father who chose courage over comfort, and about the mother who learned that being enough was never about meeting someone else's expectations. It was about deciding that the people you love deserve your very best effort, even when that effort requires you to be braver than you ever imagined possible. The Richardson name would live on through Emma, but it would carry none of the shadows that had haunted previous generations. Instead, it would represent the truth we'd learned through our ordeal, that families aren't defined by their worst moments, but by their willingness to fight for something better. And sometimes, when the afternoon light hits our Connecticut home just right, I can see Emma in the backyard, playing with the confident joy of a child who knows she is loved, protected, and enough, exactly as she is. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.